I want to start this review off by saying that Star Wars Outlaws is not a traditionally bad game. It isn't terrible, and as per usual, I think that after some patches, and in this case during a sale, you could do much worse with your time. It does the very few things that it does functionally. However, the things that this game actually does, the part where you play it, the, let's say, 4 core gameplay mechanics that you do, are the worst version of these mechanics that you could find. And I'm talking in the last 20 years, including many Ubisoft games that are like 17 years old at this point. And I will talk a lot about it later, because this is a popcorn game, much like Netflix movies that are not going to be remarkable. You're not going to remember them, but you put them on because they're going to be a decent time. You're going to forget about them in a week, but it's a good excuse to eat some popcorn, turn your brain off, and just enjoy an evening. And that's actually a perfect comparison, because Outlaws is a heist story. It's putting together a crew for one big score. You play as Kay Vess and her very cute companion, and the best character in the game, Nyx, which are perpetually down on their luck. And to keep details to a minimum in the story, within the first 30 minutes, the tutorial, she ends up with a death mark on her, and you have to put together this big heist and get out of the situation by navigating the underworld of Star Wars. And this game has a lot of okay things and a lot of frustrating and bad things in it. But if there's one thing I learned when playing this game, is that I really miss Splinter Cell, I really miss Beyond Good and Evil, and I think people at Ubisoft do too, but they can't say it. And what you can learn from this is what today's sponsor can teach you. Boot.dev. Boot.dev is what happens when a group of passionate people want to share their passion with others, specifically for back-end web development. It's an online learning platform with gamification to make learning fun, which, in case you didn't know, is the most important part of learning. It should be fun. It's a service for you to learn back-end web development from start to finish in Python and Go. And it's made for you to learn by coding. And to make that process as fun as possible, it integrates a ton of gamification. You'll earn experience, achievements, levels, and there's even a global leaderboard. Because the idea is to keep you motivated as you learn skills that are actually useful for your life, especially in this current world that we live in where everything is remote and those sorts of jobs are even more valuable. Because the skills you're learning are useful for a real job. And the people behind it share some of my same values, because the website itself is completely free. You only need to pay for the membership to actually get hands-on with the practical courses and get involved with all the gamification stuff. But if you wanted to use it as one of the largest textbooks for back-end web development in the world, you could. Which is why I encourage you to use the link below to at least check out boot.dev. See what they have to offer. See all of the free stuff that's on the website. And if you decide to sign up and begin the steps that could change your life, you can use code MUGTHIEF to get 25% off. That's 25% off in general. Doesn't matter if you decide to subscribe for 1 month or for a year, you're going to get the same discount. And a huge thanks to boot.dev, a great sponsor with a great product and values that I can get behind. Now let's get back to learning why Star Wars Outlaws isn't that great. So let's switch gears and start with the good stuff about this game first, so that if you are at least interested in it, you're better guided in your expectations and what you're going to get out of it for your time and money. I think generally speaking, Outlaws is a very difficult game to recommend. It has way too many problems of many different types, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be unfair. I think there are decent things to it. I want to start with those, and if you want to hear all the negative things, they will come later, or there's timestamps. Outlaws is a combination of Uncharted and Splinter Cell. It's actually much more Splinter Cell than Uncharted. I would classify this game as a stealth game primarily, and the moments where you're climbing up stuff and doing platforming in very Star Warsian locations are good and decent fun. Some of the stealth sections are a bit more open and can be fun in a very basic way. We'll get into that later. And the really good parts about the game are the world and living in it and taking your time. If you let yourself get swept away by the story, you do turn off your brain. I think you'll enjoy the interactions, the setups, the locations, and maybe it was because I had turned my brain off a little bit too much while playing the game, but I was surprised by some of the twists and turns. But all of that is decent. I think that the general narrative thread as you build up towards that final heist is a big part of the good in this game. And with that said, if you're coming into the game with those right expectations of this being a Ubisoft open world game, I think you'll find that there's a lot here that's an improvement over some of their previous games. The reason that I think that it's better than before is because of how it's all grounded within the narrative, the idea that you're in this underworld, you have the different faction systems, and the factions do affect how you have access to certain things throughout the game. So if you wanted a specific upgrade, you might need to be in a decent standing with a faction. Otherwise, you can still obtain it, but you're going to have to stealth your way through that location because it's only open if you have a good relationship with them. And that whole underworld motif ties into how a lot of the progression and the side quests are actually told to you, which is through leads. Instead of just getting a ton of map markers, which there are, it is still just as annoying as it always has been that you're out in the open world and there's a bunch of question marks. Some of them are meaningful, some of them are not. I think the proportion here is better. Ubisoft is getting rid of some of their bloat, but there still is some of it. But the big stuff, the stuff that actually matters, are little clues that you pick up on. You might overhear a conversation, you might see an interact, and somebody there will hint at something. And if you hear it out, it might lead you to a new location where you can find a data pad or something like that, which eventually will lead you to a side quest to a major character in the sense that they provide you abilities, a new upgrade tree or something like that. So it's all very closely woven, and it's not just for the bigger things, but just hearing, oh, this material that I need to upgrade this one thing can be found here. And just the fact that it's more contextualized within the story and the general theme that the game wants to present, it makes it feel less gamey and it makes you want to spend a bit more time in this world, which it fails to do in pretty much every other way. But I enjoyed how it's all grounded in that sense, like how the abilities are learned from those mentors that come sometimes from side quests instead of just being an upgrade tree. I enjoyed more or less the scope of the planets. You have 4 different areas in the game. Toshara and Akiva kind of have the same level of space stuff and planet side stuff. Tatooine has no space stuff, but it's a very big, very boring area. And then Kijimi has a lot of space stuff, and as a planet, it's only the city. But I think there's a decent balance. It doesn't feel overly large, and if you wanted to skip through a lot of the open world stuff, you can. And I think its strongest positives and some of the strongest negatives actually come from its presentation. Wandering around these locations that can look beautiful, sometimes it does have graphical issues, it does have glitches, and we'll talk about performance at the end of this review. But exploring these locations, talking to people, and especially the feeling of becoming more known in the criminal underworld and getting more access to stuff and how the story plays out, it's all well done. And I like some of the characters here, including Kay, which I think it's very safe in its writing, but it does feel like someone trying their best to fake it until they make it, while very much in over her head. The best part of it all is Nix, who is the traditional Star Wars non-verbal sidekick. He's charming, he's very well animated, and just authentically joyful. Especially there's these mini games everywhere you go. You can kind of find food vendors, and you have this little mini game where you and Nix share a meal, and it's really delightful. Like it's the type of thing that puts a smile on your face no matter what. So I can very much enjoy how the game looks, and I can enjoy the story and the characters, except for the facial capture, the lip sync, some of those animations. I have no clue how Ubisoft doesn't have this like down pat by now. These characters can look really good in very specific lighting conditions and for seemingly no reason when the game seems to decide to load like a high quality, well-defined version of their faces sometimes. Or maybe it is just the lighting or camera angles or who knows what's going on. And also sometimes the lip syncing can actually match. And you can tell that when the game goes into the pre-rendered cutscenes where everything is meant to look perfect. But then most of the time, genuinely most of it, they look like PS3 abominations where the lip sync was accidentally switched for the German dub. Weird angles, weird eyes, weird shapes appear that, again, in other moments, in other conditions, the characters look great. So I mean, take it as you will. Now, the other big positive comes with a very big negative. This game can be very beelined if you wanted to. You can stick to the main quest, and if I'm not misremembering anything, you will never really be required to go on a side quest, because those side quests that are required are part of the main quest. And you can ignore some of the open world and all of the other things, and you'll get a cute story with big mission to mission very easily. But I also think that the game is way better when you take your time, when you stop to smell the few roses that there are. But walking slowly through the cities and sitting down to play minigames or participating in the criminal underworld activities builds up a lot of context that makes the game better. You get a better feel for the story of Kay as she becomes an actual known person there, and stuff goes from petty theft to big storylines involving major players and big stakes. And those are the positives of this game, and I wanted to put that up front because I don't think that this game is terrible, and there are people who are going to enjoy it for what it is, because I have to go on an absolute tear of some of the actual most important parts of this game. So gloves are coming off. In everything that Star Wars Outlaws does for its core gameplay, it's not just that it's simple or unengaging. It's worse at it than other Ubisoft games from literal decades ago, from 20 years ago. The more games that you've played, especially in the adventure and stealth genres, which are, especially when blended together, are some of my favorite games, the sadder that this game becomes because you can compare it to things that are so much better. There are 4 different parts to this game, and the biggest one is stealth. Most of this game is a stealth game, followed by third-person cover shooting and uncharted platforming. And finally, ship combat, including side quest activities, which will frequently have you do a little bit of platforming to reach an area, to then take down a small outpost using stealth or shooting, depending on what you want in those cases. And these are 3 5-minute distractions, but the game cycles, especially during the main quest line, which is very much well-paced for somebody to follow, once again. It'll go from pure stealth to a little bit of uncharted exploring, and then it'll go into some shooting, and then into some ship combat or some driving to a location on your speeder, and then back to stealth, and it'll cycle through all of these constantly. The only other big part of the game is hacking, which is completely meaningless, and I don't understand, like, if there is meant to be a challenge or something here, or a way of using your brain for hacking, I don't understand it, and the lockpicking minigame, which is just a rhythm minigame. But for all of these systems, especially for stealth, which is the thing that you're going to be doing the most, the game doesn't have mechanics to support the thing that you do over and over and over again, like at all. And on top of that, it uses design cues from about 20 years ago and still manages to do things worse than games from 20 years ago. So let's break down all of the problems with stealth really quickly. The AI is brain dead, but it's also not easy to understand. It's not like you have vision cones and a mini-map or something to know if somebody's going to see you, and under what conditions they see you, it's not very clear. There's a lot of small points of frustration here. Stealth sections can be divided into 2 different subtypes. There is instant fail stealth sections where if you get spotted, you have to reload to a checkpoint, sometimes many minutes before, I'm talking 10 minutes before, that are meant to be a bit more scripted in how they pan out. There's like very clearly laid out paths that are like, hey, come here, sit, wait for this guard to turn around, and then cross, and you'll get through it. But again, some of that dumb AI and the unpredictability of what is going to happen if you do something can lead to a lot of frustration. I don't know how this is a thing here. I'm not saying instant stealth is like a no-go in every single circumstance ever, but it's definitely not a go if you don't have mechanics to support it. And the other subtype, which is more common, is it's a stealth sandbox, kind of. You have to take down the guards or try and slip by all of them and get out, and if they do spot you, you go loud. The environments in which these things happen feel very much designed for you to take advantage of the things that they put there for you to use. Nyx is a big part of stealth and combat at times. You can hold down the left bumper and send them to distract people, or in puzzle solving to touch a button that is out of reach for K and things like that. But using Nyx to interact with the environment is as open as this sandbox really gets, because the tools that you have are so limited that it's very difficult to find fun in this beyond turning off your mind and doing whatever the game is clearly telling you to do. I am 100% serious when I tell you that Uncharted 4 has better stealth mechanics than this game, where the central part of it is the stealth. Because in Uncharted, at least you had ledge takedowns and aerial takedowns, which are things that are not present in this game. It feels very prepared and on rails in a way that I think is like very much done in accessibility, and the idea that a lot of people are going to want to play this game and many of them don't want options, I guess. Or at least that's Ubisoft's perspective. You can crouch, you can take out enemies from behind, and you can climb a little bit and use distractions in the environment. That's pretty much what you can do. There's a couple of different power-ups later on to like a smoke bomb type of effect and things like that, or different distractions or ways to take out guards or put them to sleep and things like that. So there are a little bit of elements that can be present from time to time, and it does open up a tiny bit, but not to the extent of the tutorial of other games that have stealth/combat at their heart. Which is why I said that the more that you know about the genre, the more that you compare it, the more painful it gets. And the game does remind you sometimes. One of your abilities when shooting is mark and execute from Splinter Cell, from the old Splinter Cell games. They're old at this point, by the way. Feel sad about that. So there's definitely not the depth or the pacing of something like the older Splinter Cell games, like the original quadrology, I believe, because you got to include Double Agent. But from Conviction and Blacklist, those games have incredible sandboxes for stealth action. Games that were crafted with the philosophy of you can go in a little bit guns blazing, you can go in completely stealth, or you can do a mix of the two, which was always my preferred playstyle. I think it was the most fun, of like sneaking through the shadows and systematically taking everybody down and charging up your mark and execute and just cruising through these maps. But you had this freedom to it where you jumped over rails and you hung and then you marked somebody and then you threw a gadget, and just the levels were crafted in a way that there was a lot of expression in how you could map out the ideal route, but also things could go sideways and you'd have to improvise. It was fantastic in these incredibly old games, and there is none of that DNA here. Instead of that, you have a game that is very rigid, very limited, very magnetic. I think Uncharted is a great example of this. There's a lot of magnetizing to things, like when you jump, when you melee things, like you kind of slightly teleport, you jump towards things. This game does that a lot, but in a way that feels like it's laid out in square boxes instead of trying to mask it the best it can. You'll press the interact button and Kay will slowly like warp into a weird animation and slowly walk, like the game is trying to figure out where to path you to that and take control away as you like march up towards an enemy and do the execution on them. It's just bad. The very basic things that you would expect are not here to that Splinter Cell Conviction level. Much less if we start talking about something like Metal Gear Solid 5, which is a shame because at times it did remind of Metal Gear Solid 5. You reach a big outpost and there's a ton of enemies and you got to figure your way in, and that's very Metal Gear-ish. Like, okay, so how do I approach this situation? From where do I want to enter the base? And from here, what do I do? And at the end of the day, I saw those situations pop up in Star Wars Outlaws, and I looked at my options and I remembered that I should have appreciated Metal Gear Solid 5 more. And the third-person shooting doesn't stack up much better. This is very basic. There's no cover button or anything. It's just the organic cover system of you're close to something that is considered cover, and you can pop out and shoot people and use some different abilities and some modifications of your weapon. Your weapon comes with 3 different modules, and you can swap between them, and they will have different ways of shooting and different weaknesses, like the ion one is just for droids and things like that. And you can use your blaster in some of the puzzle solving and exploration side of the game as well. But this cover shooting is like very by the numbers. You only have access to your blaster and its customization options, which yes, you can turn it into a rapid blaster, or you can modify the cadence of the shot and upgrade each of the individual ways that you can customize it. But you just have access to that weapon. And there are tons of weapons in the game, which are dropped by enemies or in the environment, but when you pick them up, you don't keep them. You can't have them. You can't modify them or buy ammo for them or anything like that. They are basically power weapons. They come with the clip that they have, and you use it, and if you dare do anything else, literally any other interaction, you will drop it. Oh, you want to get on that ladder? Gotta drop this weapon. So I don't understand the point, because there was effort put into these weapons and making them sound good and feel good and have their recoil patterns, grenade launchers, carbines, assault rifles, all these sorts of things that are just kind of useless and sometimes are more of a hassle than anything else, because when you pick it up, you now have to be aware you can't do anything except shoot it and then let go of it. In the mid-game, you actually get access to heavy weapons from a mentor, and it's the same type of deal, but with other weapons. Like, there's more of them, but you still can't do anything with them. But it's fine. It's never really challenging, in my opinion, and it definitely isn't exciting. The part I think holds up the best is the platforming and exploration side of the game. And that's just because, it's hard to screw that up at this point. This is a very basic version of whatever you're thinking. Again, it's not Prince of Persia and the Sands of Time. I think that most of the platforming-centric missions even fall below some of the better vaults in Assassin's Creed 2 or Assassin's Creed Brotherhood or Black Flag. They are very simple, kind of basic platforming things. Climb up this thing, press A 5 times in a row to go up the thing, and then jump from this one platform to another. The most you get is your little grappling hook that you throw up and swing from. So it's very basic navigational platforming challenges here that are more the spectacle, the environment, the scale, and being there that matters to them, but they are well done for what they are, even if they are, again, not close to anything on the level of previous Ubisoft games or Uncharted or anything like that. The final element is the ship combat, which is really, again, very unremarkable. It works fine. You can log on to targets and then lead your shots predicting where they're going to go, which is pretty fun. You have a missile system, and there's a whole upgrade system for the ship. The ship is a very big part of the story as well, the Trailblazer. And you can explore the areas outside of the planets and engage in space combat and do some loot collection and little missions and things to explore out there that do lead to some combat encounters where it's a little bit more involved and you have to take out the ship's generators by locking onto that and things of that nature. But it's nothing to write home about. It's a nice little side distraction, and that's pretty much it. And if you're okay with everything here being okay, the wrapper, the package that it comes in, can be fine and entertaining, and again, a popcorn game. But what makes me sad is to know that there have been so many other great examples made by other Ubisoft studios of this, and it leads me to my biggest problem with Star Wars Outlaws, which is I think that this game shouldn't have been the game that it is. I know some people expected more of a bounty hunter style game, something more grandiose than this is, but I actually think that what this is super interesting. It's just not what I want from what the game presents. I'm not asking for this game to be a different game. I'm asking it to be the same game that it is, but better. I really do believe, and this is the most super hypothetical part of this review, that Ubisoft needed this game to have this open world. It needed this game to have its progression mechanics. It needed it to be the way that it is because it's a big partnership with Disney. It's a big opportunity for them with the license, and they needed the game to be big and approachable and accessible to the largest amount of people possible. But at the core of this game, what there is are mechanics and systems that are reminiscent of Beyond Good and Evil, of Splinter Cell, when you're navigating the open world and how much more limited it is, and just these small, important locations instead of thousands of different locations like something like Assassin's Creed Valhalla. It reminded me of the small but meaningful open world of Beyond Good and Evil so many years back, especially because that game also puts a lot of emphasis on its stealth and navigation and puzzle solving. These stealth sandboxes that are theoretically well designed, if very on the nose, are very much Splinter Cell-like. And I think that if this game were allowed or were envisioned from the start as a game that was going to fulfill a very different fantasy and progression systems that Ubisoft is familiar with, allow me to do double takedowns and aerial takedowns and ledge takedowns, and let me find different, cooler ways and improve how I move through these sandboxes and through these environments. I mean, you guys make Assassin's Creed, right? If the open world were maybe not even there, or if it were even more scaled back towards that Beyond Good and Evil style, and just focused on, hey, find these cool secrets and explore these mini dungeons and things like that. Or, and I know that this is like a common joke that is made about how Ghost of Tsushima is just Assassin's Creed but better, but if Star Wars Outlaws replicated the feel of arriving to an Imperial outpost and scouting it out, and had the different mechanics and progression systems that enhance those mechanics that Ghost of Tsushima has, I would be having a ton of fun with this game. Even if it still did absolutely nothing new, I could seriously enjoy what it presents. There is a great game hiding inside a very plain and safe and boring and limited one in Star Wars Outlaws. And that's what truly made me sad throughout my playtime. I see from other Ubisoft properties how this game could have been so much more. And while I can still, as I showed in all the positive section of this video, I can still appreciate it for what it is. I can approach it on its own terms and say, hey, if that sounds good to you, get this on a deep sale. Or if you, for some reason, ever pick up Ubisoft Plus for any other game, you can dip into this one for a short amount of time and enjoy it for what it is. While you're at it, go back into the Ubisoft catalog and play those games that are better. Play Beyond Good and Evil. Play some of the Splinter Cells. I think Conviction and Blacklist are very much underrated. Play Rayman 3. Just play Rayman 3. When else am I going to have a reason to say that? But it's painful to know what Ubisoft is and what they've done, what their history is, what they are capable of, and how if they had put their A game that they've had in the past, yes, 15 years ago or whatever, and put that into this game, it could be so much more. I mean, even Watch Dogs 2, I think, has better stealth gameplay and sandbox systems to it. And even something at that level, I think, would elevate this game a lot more if it just focused better and more often on what it's supposed to do, and then fleshed out those systems instead of leaving them basically as bare bones as possible. And that's why it's just that. That's my review of it. That's who I would recommend it to and under what conditions. And otherwise, I'm always optimistic whenever I can on this channel. I hope that this team gets another shot at this license and they can make the game that sometimes it feels like it wants to be. Then maybe even some people on the team wanted it to be. I hope that they can not worry about how people are going to perceive it or how people are going to approach it, and instead just do what they want to and really explore a stealth gameplay, even potentially immersive sim side of that, and make a game that is remarkable. Before we go, the only thing that I have left on my script and my notes is the performance. So let me remind you that liking and subscribing tremendously helps this video, so that maybe in the future I can bring you these sorts of reviews before the game is out instead of after. So if you value my opinion, you think that what I say is valuable, it's useful, it's something that people should consider, liking and subscribing is the best way to support that. Performance in this game is absolutely terrible. The game has ray tracing on. It just does. And that means that its performance is going to take a hefty hit because of that, even as much as they try and optimize it. I played this game on a 4090 with a 13th Gen i9. It did not perform well. In order for it to perform well, you need to have DLSS or FSR on. If you do not, the game is basically unplayable. And I'm speaking with my rig. Doesn't matter what things you turn down. And on top of that, I think that for it to perform well, it needs frame generation. And it is one of the games where the frame generation has been most visible to me, and maybe even to you in the footage. Despite all of that, it had multiple graphical glitches. It is unpolished as all heck. It has bugs. It has weird interactions, weird animations. It has things that teleport or that magnetize incorrectly. Consistently throughout my entire playthrough, I had moments, specifically in the open world when you're on your speeder, where the game would go down to 10 FPS and just be unplayable. It would run in slow motion, essentially, and at 10 FPS, it's hilarious. I have footage, and I would need to either quit out and reload or go and load a previous save game, or also just save and load right where I was. Whatever combination of those things would make the game start up fine, but it happened at least 6 times, which is 6 times too many for a game that is asking people $120 for early access to then wipe the people who paid that their saves. So just wanted to say that at the end here. Having said all of that, I've been Mug. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that the video was enjoyable, that it informed you if you were considering the game. A very special thanks to my patrons up on the $1 patron wall. It's called that way because there's only one tier, $1, and they support me in doing what I do. Check out the channel for more videos. If you're unsure about subscribing, check it out. Much love, enjoy video games, and as always, I will see you again very soon.